have died. And it's got to stop. And to become a political pawn, to lower ourselves to this, is stunning to me. I'm here for these people. I'm here because the American people called us to be there for them. It's their time to step up, please.
Veterans groups are expected to camp out on the Capitol steps for a fifth day, calling on lawmakers to pass the PACT Act, a bill that would expand aid for veterans exposed to toxic burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. It comes after Senate Republicans blocked the bill last week, with Republican Senator Pat Toomey facing the most criticism. He delayed the legislation over a $400 billion spending amendment, but said he's working to change the bill in a way that wouldn't change a penny in funding for veterans programs.
What I'm trying to do is change a government accounting methodology that is designed to allow our Democratic colleagues to go on an unrelated $400 billion spending spree that has nothing to do with veterans and that won't be in the veteran space.
All right, joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. Are Democrats using this bill to go on some sort of spending spree? What's going on here?
No, that's ridiculous. But let's make it clear. Pat Toomey was one of the 14 Republicans who opposed it the first time around. He has been consistent. He does not support spending this money on veterans. That's his prerogative. What is harder to explain is why 25 of his colleagues supported the bill the first time it came through the Senate. And then when it came back for a procedural reason, they all opposed it. This question of whether the money in the bill is mandatory spending or discretionary spending, that didn't change. It has always been mandatory spending. There is nothing substantive that has changed in the legislation. So Pat Toomey all along has opposed this bill. That's his right as a senator. But why did 25 Republicans switch their vote? The only thing that changed was that this deal on climate change and lowering prescription drug costs was announced by Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer. It seems that anger over that agreement is what caused these 25 Republicans to take out their frustration on veterans.
So that's what I was going to ask you, is why did they change their vote? And so they're mad about something else? What? They're mad about Dems looking too good?
Well, listen, I remember the first vote on the floor when 84 Democrats and Republicans voted for it. I remember Pat Toomey being on the floor lobbying against the bill. It's not as if his Republican colleagues didn't know his objections to this decision to make the funding mandatory, but they still all voted for it. The only thing that changed after that was, not the strength of Pat Toomey's arguments. What changed is the fact that we got closer to passing climate change legislation. And, Republicans all along have been pretty clear about their interest in stopping legislation that they think is good for America simply to punish Democrats. Before they stopped the PACT Act, they had threatened to block something called the CHIPS Act, which is a bill to restart microchip manufacturing in America, a bill that Republicans supported, but they announced to the world they would oppose it simply to punish Democrats for finally getting consensus on the issue of climate change. So this is a tactic that Republicans have been pretty unapologetic about using for the last month. It's a pretty strange one to decide to hurt your country, to oppose legislation that's good for your country simply because you're angry that Democrats are moving forward on climate change legislation.
Senator Murphy, good morning. It's Jonathan Lemire. As I'm sure you know, Senate Majority Leader Schumer suggested this bill would come up for a vote in the next couple of days. And Senator Cornyn from Texas suggests this time, in a tweet, says it will pass, suggesting that, yes, indeed, it was being held a few days out of spite. But you mentioned the climate change legislation, and I wanted to get you on the big picture reconciliation bill, this deal struck by Schumer and your colleague, Senator Manchin. We've been talking about it all morning. All eyes now on Senator Sinema. Do you believe she will come along and vote for this bill, allowing it to pass?
I certainly won't endeavor to speak for Senator Sinema. She's a friend. I know her well, having written the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the gun bill, with her. She'll come to her own decision. But obviously, there are many elements of this bill that Senator Sinema supports and frankly, wrote. The prescription drug provisions in this bill that allows for the federal government to negotiate directly with the drug companies. Those provisions are really due to Senator Sinema's hard work. So It'll be her decision ultimately. Obviously, you're in a 50-50 Senate. You need every single vote, and those of us who care about this bill will be making the case to Senator Sinema that it's good for the country and good for Arizona.
Senator Murphy, I'm curious what your thoughts are about Speaker Pelosi visiting Taiwan. A lot of talk about whether she should go or not. It does look, according to certain reports, that she is going to be going to Taiwan. Do you support that? And if she does go, what does she need to say on the ground there?
Listen, it's up to Speaker Pelosi to make that decision for herself. I'm not in the business of giving her advice. I think it would be important for her to re-articulate our current Taiwan policy. And more broadly, if this country is going to create a different policy on Taiwan, if we are going to choose to give some kind of implicit security guarantee, then let's make that decision purposefully. I do worry a little bit about accidentally creating a new policy that provides a security guarantee without that going through the United States Congress, being vetted by the administration. I'm not saying that the Speaker's trip by itself creates that new policy, but we've got to be careful here, because if we are going to step up and agree to defend Taiwan, well, then that requires an enormous amount of new defense expenditure, a repositioning of our forces. Let's do that in a thoughtful way.
Isn't that our stance right now? Or isn't that the understanding that if mainland China invades Taiwan, that the United States would defend Taiwan?
It actually, I would argue it is not. Our position is that we will assist Taiwan in defending itself, and that historically has meant being a security partner, providing them with defense material. But, of course, this whole policy of strategic ambiguity has meant that it has been unclear whether the United States would come to the defense of Taiwan. It may be that it is in our security interest to do that, but we have purposefully left that question unanswered over the years. You can argue whether that's a good policy or a bad policy, but thus far our decision has been to support Taiwan's ability to defend itself and leave slightly open this question of whether the U.S. forces are going to come to Taiwan's defense. I really don't think that that's a bad policy to keep China guessing. And if we're going to change that policy, then let's just do it thoughtfully and purposefully.
What would be the impact and this is not a leading question. I'm not suggesting what policy position I think you or other members of the Senate should take. I'm just genuinely curious what your thoughts are on what the impact on international security would be if Vladimir Putin were allowed to maintain, hold gains that he made by illegally invading Ukraine, and then we allowed China to hold any gains they would make in a possible invasion of Taiwan.
Well, so I think you are right to make the case that these two are interconnected. I think the most important thing we can do right now to prevent China from invading Taiwan is to kick Russia out of Ukraine. There's no question that President Xi is watching Putin's degree of success. He is watching to see if the West, if the United States and Europe lose interest in Ukraine. And if we do, then I think it potentially gives him a green light. So we are on the cusp of the post-World War II order where big nations didn't change their borders through force coming apart. And I think right now, the most important thing we can do to stop China from making a move on Taiwan is to make clear to the Ukrainians that we are with them. We are with them today and we are with them in the future to make sure that they ultimately regain their own sovereignty.
All right, Senator Chris Murphy, thank you very much for being on this morning. We will be in touch.